William Cobbett was born in Farnham on the 9th of March 1763. His first job was scaring birds from the fields that had been freshly sown with seeds. As Cobbett got big and stronger, he went on to weed the wheat fields, harrow the barley, hose the peas, help bring the harvest, and finally drive the horses in ploughing.
About a mile from Farnham, Cobbett worked at a little hop garden at the Bourne. He enjoyed the company of the hounds and would not return home till dark, with legs full of thorns and supperless empty belly. Cobbett once got told off by a huntsman for taking the hare's tail, so Cobbett played a trick on the huntsman by tying a red herring to a piece of string and ran through the fields, misleading the huntsman, eventually throwing the herring into the river.
Whilst working at the Bourne, Cobbett used to play at Sand Hill with two of his brothers. Cobbett would pull his arms inside his smock frock. His brothers would then push him, rolling down the hill like a barrel.
As a young boy, Cobbett and his three brothers would sit in the chimney corner listening to their father read the newspaper aloud to them. The other three boys found this tiresome, but after dark Cobbett also used to practice speeches aloud when by himself. He used to throw his arms around and make speeches to the bushes.
Cobbett worked at Farnham Castle as a gardener's boy, and it was at that age he first heard about the wonderful garden at Kew. On his way to see them, he saw an intriguing book in the window of a shop. He spent all his money he had left on it, climbed into the nearest field and sat down to read it on the shady side of a haystack. He always carried it with him.
When Cobbett was about 19, he went to stay with a relative near Portsmouth. It was here where he saw the sea for the first time, and he wanted to be a sailor. Unfortunately, when Cobbett went to sign up, the captain took pity on him and refused his offer.
Cobbett got a job in London as a clerk to an attorney called Holland. There, Cobbett sat upon a great high stool in an office. He worked from 5 in the morning till 9 at night. It improved the speed of his handwriting.
In 1784, Cobbett joined the army in Chatham, and as a private soldier, he earned 6 a day. Many of the recruits died from sheer hunger, lying in their beds, crying on account of hunger.
Whilst in army, Cobbett was located in Canada. Here the land covered with snow 7 months of the year, and thousands of deaths took place every year from people being frostbitten. He read novels, plays, histories, poetry, and bought himself a copy of a grammar book. Cobbett wrote the whole grammar out 2 or 3 times and repeated it every morning and evening.
When Cobbett was nearly 21, he first met the woman he would marry, 13-year-old Nancy Reed. Cobbett proposed in 1787. On the 5th of February 1792, they were married in London when he was 28 and she was 17. Nancy marked the marriage certificate with a cross. She had never learned to read or write, and she never did.
In 1787, Cobbett first noticed that the quartermaster kept wages for himself. According to the old sergeants, this had been the case for many years. Cobbett was appalled by this after all the hunger his men had endured. Cobbett collected evidence of books to prove this. On the 19th of December 1791, Cobbett received his discharge. On 14th of January 1792, Cobbett wrote to the Secretary of War explaining his charges against the officers and enclosing a petition to the king. But time went by and nothing was done. Cobbett began to be very suspicious, and on March 24th, a court-martial was finally set, but Cobbett was warned that he was going to be accused of treason and sent to Botany Bay.
Before the 24th of March, Cobbett and his wife Nancy ran away to France and stayed there for 6 months. But the French Revolution had already started, and Cobbett soon realised Englishmen would no longer be welcome there. At the end of August 1792, they boarded the sloop Mary, a small American ship bound for New York. The voyage lasted about 45 days, during which they were tossed about upon the ocean like a cork. Once in America, Cobbett wanted to set up a school in Wilmington, but when they arrived there were many Frenchmen who'd escaped the revolution wanting to learn English. Cobbett found he could earn lots of money visiting the boarding house where they stayed and teaching them English. One day, whilst teaching, a French student decided to read a newspaper article about Dr. Priestley, an English supporter of the French and American Revolution. The student agreed with the article when Cobbett strongly defended his king and country. Cobbett began a career in political writing, firstly under the name of Peter Porcupine. Cobbett revealed his identity when he first opened a bookshop on the 11th of July 1796. Cobbett deliberately showed his support for England by putting up pictures of kings and queens. This provoked a hostile crowd. Cobbett published a journal called Porcupine's Gazette that ran from 1797 to 1799. Cobbett had once published an attack on Dr. Rush, whose cure for yellow fever, in Cobbett's opinion, was nonsense. Charged with libel, Cobbett could not pay the fine of his crime. Therefore, along with his wife and 2 children, retreated to England on the 1st of June 1800.
On his return, the English government had been very grateful for his writings in America and wanted him to write one of the government's papers. Cobbett refused and started writing his own paper, the Political Register. On his return, Cobbett also noticed how times had changed. Well-dressed people had now become underpaid, fed, and poorly clothed. They had also stopped brewing their own beer, and food prices had gone up. Cobbett decided in 1806 that the government of England was in need for a serious reform. Cobbett, with his family, decided to settle in Botley. Cobbett was then accused of treason for attacking official government policy and brought to trial.
Cobbett was found guilty on 15th of June 1810 and sentenced to 2 years in prison. So he went to prison and wrote his Political Register each week, criticising the government as much as ever. On release, Cobbett caught a ship to America in fear of another arrest. He rented a farm and stayed there for 2 years, eating mainly vegetables he grew and drinking nothing but water and milk. In May 1819, his house burned down and he built himself a tent line with old English newspapers. His bed was made of wood and had a pillow of straw. He lived like this for several months and finally returned home on 30th of October 1819. In 1830, Cobbett, in agreement with the others, published their reform agenda. Cobbett had campaigned long and hard for political reform, leading to the passing of the Great Reform Act in 1832. He held a labourers' festival in the small village in Hampshire. 6,000 or 7,000 people attended.
As a result of the Reform Act, he, alongside fellow reformer John Fielden, was elected without opposition. Cobbett attended his first day of Parliament on the 29th of January 1833. Cobbett had a special outfit made by a local tailor in London. When Cobbett was an old man, he intended to write a story of his life, but he was just too busy defending rights of the poor and fighting injustices to get round to it. Cobbett died on his farm in the village of Normandy, near Farnham, on June 18th, 1835. 8,000 people came to his funeral on Saturday the 27th in St Andrew's Church, Farnham. His 4 sons carried the coffin and he was buried in St Andrew's Churchyard.